And he has a presentation and some things that he wants to share with us. So we're going to start with Brother Bly. So if you want to come up and share with us about your academy.
Appreciate you, sir. Thank God for what you're doing here and your heart for education. And I'm glad to be here. I do apologize. First of all, I apologize for not eating anything. It's not that I'll stand offish, but I have to preach at 2 o'clock, and I don't think my stomach. And that's why I have to leave by 1 o'clock. We have this funeral that I have to go to. But I'm so glad to be here. I'm kind of honor and privilege. And I'm so glad for the heart of so many people who want to get involved in education. And, I believe the question is not so much how to and what to do, but it's telling us to do it. I believe the Spirit of God is telling the body of Christ to get involved in academics. I believe there's a clarity call. It's loud and clear. The Lord began to deal with me, and I was hearing that call, but I wasn't really that excited about stepping in and trying to get some families who are approaching me about us doing something in education, trying to get them segued into other venues of education, other private schools. But the Lord just kept dealing with me and dealing with us about our church doing that. So we started a private Christian school in August. So we've been going 6 months, and the Lord has been blessing us. And so I think the important thing for us was the fact that the Lord was the impetus of this, so that we really could not resist doing it, because we knew that, number one, it was Him. Number two, we would have to answer to Him if we did not. And we could not consider, the giants in the land and how tough it might be or what obstacles we face, because we need to understand that the Lord takes out giants. And so we have to go forward. And it's been a delightful experience for us. I will say that there are resources for you. And those who are homeschooling and those who are co-oping, they can tell you that there are a plethora of resources, just an abundance, a whole cadre of resources that are available as far as what you can use as textbooks and teaching guides. And so it's not a concern about what to teach. You will have the wherewithal and the information and the academic base to expose the students to, whether it be accelerated Christian education, which is something that we used at first and are using, or others, Becca, Bob Jones, Hillsdale, whatever it might be. I will say that because we did not have any quote-unquote teachers, people who had experience teaching, when we started, we used the accelerated Christian education curriculum, because it basically self-teaches, and you basically just need tutors, people who may need to help students in regards to some of the higher math, but it basically teaches the students itself, and the tutors or teachers who are in the classroom who don't know the material can learn it from the PACES, what they call PACES, the booklets that the Accelerated Christian Education curriculum uses. And so I would highly recommend taking a look at the Accelerated Christian Education curriculum if you're not familiar with that, because it will help you when you start a co-op or start a school, because it is so good at teaching the subject matter. And the student must become sufficiently proficient in the subject matter to go to the next pace. And so they have to make at least a C, a low C in the material that they're on to go to the next pace. So when they do matriculate through these paces, they will know the material, because you can't go to the next pace unless you have some type of mastery of the pace where you are. And now I will also say that I really believe that everybody, and again, it's a clarion call, the Holy Spirit is talking to us. Everybody needs to either start a school or help somebody who's starting a school, or somebody who's running a school. We all have a part to play. You may not be called to start a school, but you can help somebody who's already started one. And I have been given so much help, and that's the thing. It's so amazing. Once we just jumped in, we sent our, we got the AC curriculum. We went to the ACE training, which you don't have to do. You could just use a curriculum. You don't have to be involved in the quote-unquote ACE program, but we decided to do that. But once we jumped in, there's so many people that begin to help us. And some of them are in this room today, and I'm so grateful for that. But what I'm saying is that you will have the help you need. In fact, it's on my heart to help people because so many people have helped us. And so if anybody you've already started a co-op or a school, or you think about starting one, if you want to incorporate, then I pledge to do that for you for free, no charge. If you want to do a 501c3, I will be glad to do that for you for free, no charge. Whatever I can do to help, because I believe that we've gotten so much help. It's time for us to begin to pour into other schools and help them also. The students are just excited. And at first I was thinking, well, Lord, now I want to make sure this is just not this excited because most of these students go to our school, but the students that don't go to most of these students go to our church, but the students that did not go to our church are excited. And I give you an example. We've had students who are coming up to me and saying, Pastor, you give the upper grades a research paper every week to do, and you don't give us one in the lower grades. Can we start having a research paper?
I never heard of that.
Yeah. Asking for homework, and then we felt like there were so many gaps that we needed to fill in regards to learning that we ended up going an extra hour instead of stopping at 2:30. We would go to 3:30, and the students were on board for that. And then also we ended up going to a year-round school because we wanted to make up gaps and really see some improvement in some areas and just excel in some things. And they were on board with that. And then now I'll give you another example. Now parents are hearing about us. We had a new student to start who had been in high school in Indiana. She lives in Indiana, and she went to Floyd Central and another Indiana high school. And her first day was yesterday, but I was interviewing her, and I looked at her, her background, and I said, now, the way things have been for you, we may, end up asking you to spend an extra year here. Would it bother you to graduate at an age later than what you would be graduating, stay with us next year? And she said no. She didn't grimace. She just said no, because she had been. That was her third day with us. The first 2 days she was just walking through the school and attending classes and going to lunch with our students and just getting the environment. And she was so excited about the environment. She said, if I need to stay another year, I'll stay here in order to learn what I need to learn. So I'm saying that people get excited, people get on board. One last thing I'll say is that it's important to build relationships with parents. Parents, sometimes a few parents I found don't believe that their kid can do anything wrong. And so when we discipline kids, they come in and say, I want to talk to the pastor, and this teacher, did this and did that. And so then when we meet with the parent, we get all the details ironed out. Then the parent sees that no, nobody mistreated your child, but your child needed to be reprimanded and needed to be punished. But as we build relationships with the parents, they begin to trust us. And the main parent that always, just complain about stuff. If I was in a church, I'd say gave us hell, but I'm in a church, I'm not going to say it. But other day she told me she loved me. And I said, as much as you have complained about stuff, and my daughter ought to be able to do this and do that, she said she loved me. So I believe that when you build relationships with the parents and with the kids, we do things after school with the kids, we take them on field trips. I believe that they begin to trust you, and they see your heart, and they will buy in, and they'll not only go to school and not only come to school, but they will begin to be the school. They'll be excited about it, and they'll begin to advertise to their friends because they'll feel like that it's really doing them a lot of good. And I think that's what I want to say.
Thank you, Brother Block. That was wonderful. Okay, next up, we're going to have Holly Toy come and share about Solid Rock Homeschool Co-op that we are blessed to have here at First Church. So, Holly?
pleased to be here. I love talking about homeschooling. I started homeschooling in 2008 with my son, who is now graduated and freshman in college. I still have a daughter that I'm homeschooling. And I thought, well, I want community when I'm homeschooling because it's really isolating, stay at home with your kid, doing all the stuff all yourself. And so I'm talking with other friends who are homeschooling. They said, Home for His Glory. So I looked up Home for His Glory. They had a co-op right down the street. I had no clue what a co-op was. But I called the director and I signed up and I started going to classes. And a homeschool co-op is where parents volunteer to teach classes to each other's kids. And it can be real small with just a few families or 40 families. It can get really big. We just started a co-op here at this church. Our first day was yesterday. We've got about 15 families, about 40 kids. Half of them are middle school and high school. And we had 4 classes at a time going. We just had 3 class periods. It went really great. It's not a drop-off. It is a support for homeschool families. So that you come with your kids and you stay while your kids are in classes and you're either teaching or assisting. You may or may not be in the same class with your kids. I had 2 hours where I was not in the same class with my daughter, but I did teach a class that was her grade range, and so she was in that class with me. But it gives you community, which really can be lacking when you're at home homeschooling. That can be really isolating. So a co-op is a great time to get together with other families. We get together for the purpose of teaching classes for each other's kids. But it's actually a support group for the parents, because homeschooling can be so hard you want to quit. Your kid, I mean, and because it's just hard. Especially like 5th and 6th grade, the kids are going through a lot of changes emotionally, hormones are kicking in, they've got a bad attitude, and I'll tell you, I have had dreams of dropping the kid off at some school somewhere and walking away. Because it's hard. But because I was in a co-op and I had friends that also had the same struggles, I could say, listen, I'm just losing my mind, I can't handle this, and then we can talk it through. They give me some solutions because they've had the same struggles, and it's maybe a change in curriculum, or a change in attitude, a change in approach of how you're dealing with your students, and it just really helps to smooth the way. So if you consider homeschooling, if you're going to homeschool, I would really strongly recommend you being involved in some type of a co-op. Home for His Glory is a Christian homeschool organization for Kentuckiana. We have 3 co-ops. We used to have 6, but COVID shut down 4 of them. So we were down to 2, and now as of yesterday, we have 3. So, if you want to be involved in a co-op, let me know. We'll get you on a waiting list to get in for the next semester. But there are other homeschool organizations, there's field trip organizations, things like that where you can get involved and meet up with other homeschoolers to have that community and to not be isolated.
Thank you, Holly. Next up is Heather Walton, and she is going to come and talk about homeschools. She's been involved with homeschooling for many years and has a great wealth of knowledge on the subject.
Yeah, I love books, so I find several of my favorites at Anglican. Yeah, and I'm involved in the Solid Rock Co-op as well, and I'm excited to be doing that. It's been a while since I was involved in a co-op, but yeah, it's good. It's enjoyable, and I'm glad to be able to be doing that. And there are so many things that you can do to be flexible with homeschooling. One of the things, Holly said she'd been tempted to quit. I was tempted to quit with my older kids and actually did. And so I ended up sending them to public school. One of them is an atheist and the other is a socialist. So so with my younger kids, that is a huge motivation for me for Christian education of all kinds, whether it's homeschooling or Christian schooling. I just firmly believe that we are going to lose our kids, lose the next generation, lose our country, if we continue to place our kids in public school. and I know that's a strong statement, but I say it unapologetically. I was a public school teacher for a couple of years, and I had kids that went through public school. And, you know, as a Christian, I did my best to try to be, you know, an evangelist or missionary, but there's only so much you can do when you're pretty much given a gag order most of the time, and when you have so many things to do that don't have to do with God, right? And so, you know, I'd like to read Deuteronomy 6, not the whole chapter, just part of it. You may be very well acquainted with this, but, so, hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and soul and your mind. And these words that I should command to you today should be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children. And you shall talk of them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, and when you lie down, and when you rise. You know, that's all the time. You know, that's all the time. And so, and it's relational. You know, God's method, and Jesus did this when he was teaching his disciples. You know, his method is relational, and there's not a word in there about academics. Not specifically, but we in our culture have put academics upon the pedestal of idolatry, honestly. Now, I'm not saying don't do good academics. We do everything for the glory of God, and we want to be well educated so that we can serve the Lord. But if we say we're going to spend 7 hours a day just doing academic content, and we neglect the character, and we neglect the scriptures, and we neglect the life skills, we're going to lose our children. They might be smart, but they will not be wise. And so for me, yes, I want my children to do well at academics, but if they do well at academics and they don't know the Lord and they don't grow up to serve the Lord, then I have failed. So, you know, I want to read you a few quotes here, because I think they tell a really good story. I'm going to start with Daniel Webster. And these are quotes from our founders. You know, a lot of people want to say that either demonize them or say that they were not really Christians, but when we hear these kinds of things, whether they were Christians or not, they had a biblical worldview. Today, a lot of Christians don't have a biblical worldview. Okay, but back then, even the non-Christians mostly had a biblical worldview. So, you know, he said, God grants liberty only to those who love it and are always ready to guard and defend it. How are we going to guard and defend our liberties? Well, I mean, we can do it ourselves for only so long, but we've got to pass the torch to the next generation.
Right.
And we were endowed by certain inalienable rights, or with certain inalienable rights, by our Creator, not our Constitution, our Creator. Our Constitution came from people who had a biblical mindset, and so they used the biblical principles, but they acknowledged that we were endowed by these rights by our Creator. Now, you know that the UN Declaration of Human Rights says that we were endowed with certain rights, but they leap out by the Creator. And so, you know, that changes things. It changes what you look at even as your rights. Daniel Webster stated, if religious books are not widely circulated among the masses in this country, I do not know what is going to become of us as a nation. If truth be not diffused, error will be. If God and his word are not known and received, the devil and his works will gain the ascendancy. If the evangelical volume does not reach every hamlet, the pages of a corrupt and licentious literature will. If the power of the gospel is not felt through the length and breadth of the land, anarchy and misrule, degradation and misery, corruption and darkness will reign without mitigation or end. Was he a prophet or what? So, you know, but we still have hope. We still have hope. And so, you know, as long as we have breath and as long as the Lord tarries, we have hope. And we have a mandate. We have a mandate to educate the next generation for the glory of God. We have a mandate to pass on God's precepts. And to teach them to love the Lord and to teach them to serve their fellow man, as Deuteronomy 6 says. We have that mandate. God has not released us from it. And so when we send our kids to a public school where they don't teach those things, what are we doing? You know, we've got to have alternatives. So President George Washington, in a letter dated March 11, 1792, wrote, "I am sure that never was a people who had more reason to acknowledge a divine interposition in their affairs than those of the United States. And I should be pained to believe that they have forgotten that agency, which was so often manifested during our Revolution, or that they failed to consider the omnipotence of that God who is alone able to protect them." So our first president believed that we needed to be sharing the gospel and sharing God's word with others, with our children, with the next generation. He said, "It is impossible to rightly govern the world without God in the Bible." Are we not seeing that today?
Yes.
It is impossible to account for the creation of the universe without the agency of a supreme being. It is impossible to govern the universe without the aid of a supreme being. It is impossible to reason without arriving at a supreme being. Religion is as necessary to reason as reason is to religion. The one cannot exist without the other. A reasoning being would lose his reason in attempting to account for the great phenomena of nature had he not a supreme being to refer to. But what in the world are they doing in the public schools? What did I grow up learning about our origins, and what did you learn about them? You know, most of us learned we were an accident. And so how do you live your life purposefully if you're an accident? Our children are losing their sense of purpose because they think they're accidents of nature. So, you know, there's a lot of motivation to do something different to benefit this next generation. Washington said, "The name of American which belongs to you in your national capacity must always exalt the just pride of patriotism more than any appellation derived from the local discriminations. The slight shades of difference, he said this, you have the same religion, manners, habits, and political principles." He was assuming a Christian nation. And so, you know, that's something that we ought to keep in mind and remember. Daniel Webster stated, "If there is anything in my thoughts or style to commend, the credit is due my parents for instilling in me an early love of the scriptures. If we abide by the principles taught in the Bible, our country will go on prospering and to prosper. But if we and our posterity neglect its instructions and authority, no man can tell how sudden a catastrophe may overwhelm us and bury all our glory in profound obscurity." Now, I don't say all this to exalt America. I say all this to exalt the Lord, because he's the one who allowed our country to become great. And I do believe that it has been a great country because our founders followed the precepts of the Bible. And I think we need to get that back because, I mean, in a sense, we are the last beacon of hope on the earth for freedom and liberty. And freedom and liberty are not American concepts. They are biblical concepts. And if we do not have the ability to preach the gospel because we're shut down or because we're, you know, told that we're criminals, we're still going to preach the gospel, right? But how is the next generation going to do that if they don't even learn it? Or, you know, I often refer to this story. Dan Egler, who was the president of the Association of Christian Schools International, told this story at a conference that I went to. And he talked about how there was a town in Africa, a village where they had no school, and then a school was built, and so the parents all wanted their kids to learn to read and write, and do math, and so they sent them to this school. Well, this was a divided town, basically half Christian, half Muslim. The school was a Muslim school. The parents thought it was okay to send them there for reading and writing and math. At home, at night, they didn't even do their homework. They simply learned the scriptures and talked about God all night long. Every single child became a Muslim. Okay? So how many people here in America that send their kids to public school, which has the religion of secular humanism? How many of those parents are sitting at home all night with the scriptures with their kids? I'm going to tell you, I wasn't one of them. Okay? And so, but even if we did, the likelihood of losing those children is high. So, you know, we need to consider that this is going to take sacrifice, you know, on our parts. If we're interested in getting involved, or if we're interested in homeschooling our children, or sending our kids to a Christian school, it takes sacrifice on our part. But that sacrifice is well worth it. Now, what we want to do here, hopefully, is to create a school similar to More Grace Academy. more of like a 4-day, program with the option to do with co-op or whatever on Fridays, but more with a homeschool mindset of the parents are going to be responsible for some of the work on their own at home. But, we want, some parents, they feel they've got to work full time, or you've got a single parent, or you've got whatever situation, they want their children to have that kind of education, but they don't feel like they can do it for whatever reason. Well, we still want those children to be trained up in the way they should go. And so we're willing to minister in that way. It's kind of, partly a mission field of children, in a sense. I mean, we're looking at targeting Christian families who want their values passed along. But we are looking at the potential of doing that here. And so we would love to get your support in that. And we know that God's in it. If God's in it, He's going to bless it, just like Pastor Bly said with his situation. But just think, we're supposed to be rescuing those being led away to the slaughter. In a lot of cases, our children are being led away to the philosophical slaughter. They're being taught lies, and they're not being taught truth. And we need to unashamedly, unapologetically stand for truth. That's what these founders did. They were, we think, oh, those were all these heroes. They were like the 3% or something. I mean, a lot of people thought that they were ungodly for doing what they were doing because they weren't honoring the king, so to speak. Okay? But they believed that they were called to give us liberty, to give their posterity, their children and grandchildren, and us on down the line, a free society. And so, in some ways, I think we owe to them for their efforts to do that, but primarily we owe it to God for what He's done for us. So, and there's one of mine right now. So, anyway, I just want to close with a quick quote, and then we'll. Let's see. Noah Webster, who wrote our first dictionary, and I would recommend his first dictionary, the very first one, 1828 dictionary. He said, education is useless without the Bible. He said the Bible was America's basic textbook in all fields. And he said God's word contained in the Bible has furnished all necessary rules to direct our conduct. Now, if our founding fathers thought those kinds of things, why and they wanted schools so that the kids would learn the same things, so they would learn those precepts. Why are those not being taught today? Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Our next presenter is noted author and speaker, Brother Israel Wayne. And we're really privileged to have him here with us today. Outside in the hallway, there is a table with his material and books. I've already picked out a couple I'm going to buy. So I hope that before you leave here today that you will take some time and look at the many books that he has written. So we're going to turn it over to him.
Well, it's a blessing to be with you all today. Glad y'all were able to make it out of your driveways. I'm from Michigan, so we're familiar with this phenomenon called snow and ice. But as I was coming down here last night, I noticed that most of the people in vehicles who were driving out there on the roads with me really shouldn't have been. I'm just going to throw that out there. Yeah, it would have been better to be at home watching TV, I think. But yeah, I appreciate the American Family Association. I'm grateful to be a part of this event. I had the blessing of being one of their keynote speakers at their national conference this last year, 2021, there in Tupelo, Mississippi. Really enjoyed that. I'm going to be at their Marriage and Family Conference coming up again this year. I will be teaching Christian apologetics to their teenagers, helping them to learn how to defend their faith. So that's something that all of our churches need to be focused on. And so I want to do a presentation here and talk about the issue of education versus schooling. And I have a little bit of a unique thesis in this message. My goal by the end of it is to try to convince you that you should not think of education and schooling as synonymous terms. I don't believe they are synonymous terms. In fact, I think increasingly when we think about schooling in the paradigm that we're most familiar with, which is institutional, government-controlled schools, that actually schooling can be a phenomenal and tremendous detriment to actual education. Now, I have to share with you a little bit of my bias so that you know where I'm coming from on this. I received a very high-quality Christian education growing up by being taught at home by a single-parent mother of 6 who dropped out of school in 9th grade. And she homeschooled myself and my 6 sisters entirely during a time in the late 70s and 1980s when homeschooling was against the law. And so we have this mentality that a student can't possibly be educated or know anything unless they're in a school. But I want you to just sort of step back and maybe think about this in terms of the 30,000-foot view of history. Actually, institutional classroom schooling is a very new invention. When you think back over 6,000 years of human history, for the most part, what you had was parents teaching their own children, and on occasion, parents coming together collectively in small groups to help teach each other's children. And in American history, what you had was dominantly homeschooling, which is parents teaching their own children, and then certain, what they called common schools, which was today what we call homeschool co-ops. And so these common schools were basically groups of people who all gathered together. They chose the curriculum for their own children. They sometimes would teach the classes themselves. Sometimes they would hire a tutor or a teacher, but it was locally controlled, it was parent controlled, it was parent directed. And it was not until 1852 in Massachusetts that the government school experiment started. And basically, a guy named Horace Mann in Massachusetts, who was a God-hater and a Unitarian, decided to start government-controlled schools for the express purpose